clinical psychologist. Like the others, I've had a few careers too. I was a teacher. My first love, I guess, was sport. So I was a phys ed teacher, and then I did that as a profession in another world, and went to psychology, and everyone assumed I was going to be a sports psychologist working with elite athletes. It's like, no, enough of that. And so I've been practicing as a psychologist for about 23 years, I think, private practice, and did TRTP about 4 years ago, and yeah, completely changed my world, revamped myself as a practitioner. I've got another 20 years ahead of me, I think, maybe 30.
Hi everyone, I'm Kim Hobson. I'm in Sydney and I'm a psychologist. And as Jude said, I've been practicing TRTP now since I did the training in February in 2016. I've been in private practice for over 30 years now, and I've got a background in working as a counsellor and psychologist in community mental health, as a counsellor at one of the universities, and I've also got a background in teaching. And I've been doing TRTP since 2016 and very, very happy with it. Thank you, Jude.
Psychotherapist in private practice in Brisbane, Australia. We're all in Australia. Been practicing for 10 years. This is my fourth career change, but the last year has been quite wonderful for me. Trained in February, as Judith said, and I see pretty much everyone. Also led a not-for-profit charity called the Centre for Men and Families, which helps men work through crises for the last 7 years.
No, I wasn't, because I guess coming from the place of Medicare seems to think that in 10 sessions you can use CBT to help people to manage anxiety and depression, and Bob's your uncle, off you go, have a good life. So if you're meant to be able to do that in 10 sessions, then why can't the TRTP, which is designed to work in 6 to sort of 8-10 hours of work, why can't that equally be as effective? So some people sort of think, oh, 3-4 double sessions, how could that possibly happen? It's like, because it's effective. And so from my perspective, I thought there's something missing here. The long term, I was known for my long term, passionate,
very long term,
patient sort of thing, and it would get results on paper, but there was always something missing. There's something missing, and so I was looking for that missing link, and to me, that's what TRTP brought, that missing link.
Okay, thank you, Helen. And what Helen says there, double sessions. So when we say 3 sessions, they're usually about an hour and a half, up to 2 hours. And yes, they can be broken into the clinical hour, the therapeutic hour. So session 1 would be half of it done on a Monday, the next half on the Tuesday. So you can break it up. But yes, they are longer sessions. Richard, were you skeptical?
Yeah, I think the better word would have been angry. Peer supervision with one of the mentors of the program. He wasn't a mentor back then. This is my peer supervision group, and he started talking about client outcomes that were too good to believe. And he was hijacking our supervision group, which had been meeting together for many years, to talk about client challenges and problems. And we'd brainstorm, as you do in supervision, and talk about possible interventions and possible conceptualizations. And here he was talking about client breakthroughs, and I wasn't happy at all. And I took it to my supervisor, and I said, I don't think that's fair that he should be talking about such wonderful outcomes. Nothing's that good. And I don't believe him. And I also, I think, had some professional jealousy, which is simply saying I wanted better outcomes for my own clients. Not that I was getting bad ones, I just wanted better ones, much better ones. And So yeah, there was a sense of skepticism because the industry doesn't talk about successes. They keep them, well, when they do, it's normally they write a book or they go on a speaking tour. There just weren't many successes, real successes talked about. And suddenly here was this approach which had amazing outcomes. And I was at first angry and then eventually curious.
Thank you very much. Were you, let's finish off this, the answers to this question. Were you skeptical when you heard about TRTP?
Somewhat. I hadn't had any first-hand experience of colleagues who were talking about it. So the first I'd heard was when I was getting information about it. I think the thing I was more skeptical about or wondering about was, is this something that I could do? So when someone creates a process, it may be very particular to that person. They have been the creator, they're going to be able to do it, but will that translate to other people? So I remember in our conversations, that's well and true, that's good, Judith, but can I do that? Is it going to be transferable? Are other people going to be able to practice this? And you're very clear and saying that indeed, yes. And still it took me about a year before I really came on board. I was investigating other ways to deal with trauma. Like Helen, I've been working in medium long-term psychotherapy. And I had also become very disillusioned with that way of working, and certainly CBT wasn't the way to go, particularly when working with traumatized people. And even though you might have reasonable outcomes after 3-5+ years of working with trauma, it just didn't seem good enough. So in the end, I just became more curious, and my curiosity and my desire for a whole lot of reasons to try something different is what eventually led me to do the process. And I've been, really delighted with the outcomes ever since.
How does TRTP differ? Perhaps we could go to the outcomes.
Well,
go on,
Richard.
No, you go.
TRTP is a very a practice that may draw on some of those, but it doesn't combine those. It's very a process that works very differently, and the outcomes are so different to I trained in EMDR, but I never really practiced it because it didn't suit me. ACT, somatic therapies, I did some training in somatic therapies. I found that TRTP is a lot more efficient and effective and goes straight to the trauma straight away. So we're easily able to identify the trauma, where it sits, how it's impacted the person, and work at that level immediately so that the client will actually experience a release straight away. Almost immediately. And some clients, after the first session, they're already experiencing such a significant change. By the second session, greater change even still, and so on. Whereas my experience with these other therapies, it isn't as dramatic, I suppose, as TRTP.
Yeah.
I was going to say that it's the application of the theory. So it brings the very best of psychodynamic theory, the very best of attachment theory, the very best of these theories that neuropsychotherapy. It brings the absolute essence of them to the experience of the client. And so many of the theories that I work with are very, very slow, whereas this is very, very fast. If you want to work with a client for 10 years, TRTP probably isn't your best option. If you want to see clients get well and never see them again, TRTP works really wonderfully. And T in sympathy is very much not what TRTP is. And in that regard, it does present a challenge. And the challenge is that the client is going to experience the energy of the practitioner. The practitioner has to do their own work, but it's not hard work. It's good work, wonderful work. But if you don't do it, you're not going to be much use to your client. It's not like you just sit behind a clipboard and analyze your client for an hour. It's not that work. It's strangely, they're doing much more of the work internally, but you're doing the work externally. It flips the whole thing around. And it's often, Judith often calls it ask about therapies. It's almost the inverse of cognitive behavioral therapy, because I change the truth of who I am, and therefore automatically my feelings and behaviors and thoughts change with it, because how I see myself, how I understand and experience myself has changed first. We don't even have to deal with the other things. If I do with CBT, I'm changing my thinking and my behaving, and then my life changes. Well, I've experienced that to be very, very slow process. This is not, this is fast.
And that requires, that CBT requires great motivation and discipline. Helen.
Yes, I agree. It sort of brings to the forefront, or sort of the good parts of many, many different therapies, and how it, to me, a big difference between TRTP and, say, ACT or CBT is that it's actually utilizing every part of the mind. So not just the 5 to 10% of the cognitive part of the mind, which is what CBT sort of works on, but the unconscious, the powerhouse of the mind, which is where everything's happening. So you can work for years and try and change, do cognitive restructuring, trying to get people to change their thinking. But if underneath the surface there are unconscious core beliefs that contrary to that, then it's just, that's why it takes so long and so ineffective. And other therapies tend to work to the symptoms. Like ACT would be, there's some great strategies, and that's great to sort of live life by, but it doesn't actually help someone to resolve or to take the emotional charge out of traumatic past events. Whereas this, cuts to the chase, takes the charge out of the past so that you can do some lovely work on your own, or with, sometimes people do like to do some extra work so that they can learn strategies moving forward to kind of enhance their life. But the main part of the work is done.
The tapes don't run consciously, they run unconsciously. People sabotage. They wonder, why do I keep getting into relationships with abusive people? Why does this keep happening to me? Why do I keep having this same thing happen over and over? It's almost as if their life is setting them up to fail, and they have no idea why, and they can't see it, they can't understand it or experience it. And because people aren't awake or aware of the unconscious core belief and the narrative that runs with it, because it runs unconsciously, they don't even know it's there.
If you are not willing to take more of a leadership role as a therapist, so often we're trained to not take up that space, and in TRTP you actually have to take command. It's a structured process, and it involves you stepping up and leading your client through that process.
Yes, it's not a collaborative process. And some practitioners, some therapists are not happy with that, and that's fine, but TRTP is not for them. It also requires the practitioner to be strong in who they are. So for some people who are lovely and gentle and meek, it wouldn't suit.
It's a very active.
Sometimes you can start off gentle and lovely and meek, and
yes, you can, Helen.
with the desire to be different, because that might be taking a long time to do it that way.
Yes.
So being open-minded to perhaps those new ways of developing your therapeutic style too.
Thank you, Helen, from personal experience. Yes. Sorry, Kim, what were you saying?
Well, really, to add to that, all the same, it's about being very actively involved in the process. Whereas with more traditional therapies, it might be engaging the client, and there's a two-way going on, or you might be sitting back and waiting for the client to do the work. You are so actively involved, and in fact, if you're not actively involved, then nothing will happen.
Yeah, from the part of the practitioner.
From the part of the practitioner. And if you're not fully engaged, well, nothing will happen. And as Helen said, the client will pick up on that. And there's a risk of them falling back into to, either the depression or the anxiety. So it's very much holding the client in the process. So unless you're really prepared to change the way you work and be actively involved, being the leader, then that won't work for you.
Thank you, Kim. Very good point. Richard.
I'd want to say that the training will get practitioners to a place where they will know exactly how to practice, exactly how to get into that place of energy. They will go through the process themselves. So if you start tentative, reluctant, you know, I've done so much CPD over the years, and normally you do days and days, sometimes weeks of training, and at the end of it, you're still not 100% sure how to practice it. You go, well, if only I could work out what the expert knows, but this, you'll come out, well, I came out of it, and I believe every student who engages in it comes out with a very clear sense of how to approach this, how to take that proactive approach with clients, how to get themselves in that empowered place before their client walks in the room. So from the get-go, the client experiences something very positive, affirming, and safe. And that's the other thing that I most like, that is so safe. I never take a client, none of us ever take a client to a place where they're re-traumatized. In fact, quite the opposite. From the very beginning, we do not ever let a client re-experience their trauma. There's one part where they're doing a bit of their homework, and we can even help them with that, talking about traumatic experiences. Even that can trigger them, but we can help them with that. So a client never needs to fear they're going to experience trauma in this process.
Can I add something to that?
Sure,
Yeah.
Helen.
So I think that was sort of going back in time. Why did I do TRTP? Because I knew enough to know that working with someone who had experienced trauma, one does not want to sort of go back into that story and talk over and over again. But I wasn't really quite sure what else to do. My toolkit was very limited, and this was a very enticing thing for me around TRTP, that it is absolutely so safe. And what happens now is, because so while I was cautious about people's stories, but in general, just that was sort of a lot of what long-term therapy is about, listening, a lot of listening. And now when I'm working with people that I'm not doing TRTP with, that's probably one of the challenges now. It's like, oh no, I don't want to go there. So it has completely changed, I guess, the way I do therapy generally now, to be much more proactive, less about sort of listening.
The homework, what we do is we get the client, before they come to the sessions, to just make a list and just dot points of the top 10 to 12 most distressing events in their life. Not traumatic, but most distressing, and just the age, name of the event, and who was there. And we give them a template. There's not very much room to write because we don't want an essay. We don't want them to be re-traumatized. It's just the age you were, the name of the event, and who was there. And for a lot of clients who are self-aware, there's a huge aha moment there, because they can see that there's a pattern. It's the same thing. Bullying, abuse, bullying, abuse, or whatever it is. Betrayal. Oh my God, it's betrayal again, and different people, but the same pattern. And so what that does is instead of taking weeks to get a client history, it's just bang, before they even come, you've got a snapshot of that person's life and the patterns that have run it. And so from there, yeah. Helen.
As a practitioner, that in itself was pretty life-changing, because that homework alone was like, wow. Through that process, I'm just learning so much more about this client than that would have taken me a long time. And to see that pattern on paper, which, going back to what we were talking about before, those unconscious core beliefs create patterns, and people have abuse, or abandonment. Everyone has them, and it's very helpful for the clients to see that pattern, and that helps them to understand, the why TRTP works and what is happening. But that alone was pretty transformational as a practitioner.
Yeah.
Yes. And another thing that we do, that some mental health professionals coming to webinars write me emails saying just your thing of just at the beginning of session 1, here's the T. Do you want to be not well or well? Make a decision. Who's responsible for you being well? And what's going to be the worst thing about it? And having the client take on the responsibility for their own wellness. A lot of people who don't come and do TRTP say, just doing that is, I'm so less exhausted. I realized I was doing more work than the client. I was wanting the client to be well more than they were themselves. So there's a lot in TRTP that makes things very streamlined.
Works with Asperger's just as well as somebody without Asperger's. I have done it with clients with acquired brain injuries, but you have to work slower.
Mm-hmm.
I would not work personally, though if you had expertise, you may be able to work with someone with distorted perceptions or schizophrenia, though I'd be very reluctant to work in that space. Intellectual impairment, I'd probably be reluctant to work in that space. But ASD does not present any problem at all.
Yeah.
For TRTP.
So to me, that they support evidence-based therapies, of which, so once upon a time CBT wasn't evidence-based because it was new. TRTP is, relatively speaking, in its infancy compared to many others, it will become evidence-based. But so to me, what I think about that is that there are absolutely aspects of CBT, motivational interviewing, interpersonal therapy, relaxation, anything that is part of the underpinnings of what would be considered to be acceptable from APRA or APS is within this treatment. It just happens to be sort of a packaged sort of version of it. So it's unique in itself. Once again, I sound a bit like I'm repeating myself, but it has aspects of all those.
Yes, it's got aspects of psychoeducation, of Gestalt, of whatever. Yeah. So it can be. And the other thing is that in terms of restructuring. Yes, and in terms of evidence-based, our small end point is to change how mental health is done. And to that end, we have practitioners, we have within our graduate community, academics, etc., who are taking our research projects and running with them. People like Dr. Jennifer Rice, who taught at one of the big Melbourne universities for 16 years on psychology research design. Patrina Barson, who's a GP who teaches at the medical department at Melbourne Uni. We are currently in talks with the medical department at Melbourne Uni about partnering with us in our research, and with Phoenix Australia, which is one of the biggest PTSD research organisations in Australia. We have Rosemary Boone in Sydney, who takes EEGs before and after, showing the difference in brain function after TRTP. Rosemary is a leader in the field of neurofeedback and can tell by an EEG whether someone has PTSD or not, because of course there is changes in brain function with trauma. There are changes in brain structure with trauma. And if you, we've done some webinars with Rosemary, so they're available on the YouTube channel as well. Joe, what happens is in the training, even before you begin the training, you're assigned a mentor, someone who will hold your hand during the 8 weeks. It's an 8-week program. And you do session 1 and session 2 of TRTP, working on your own stuff, your own history, before you even start the training. And it's only in doing that, Joe, that you understand the power and possibilities of TRTP. There's nothing like experiential learning, is there? So every student does TRTP just before they begin the training. And then for the first 3 weeks of the training, you learn all about session 1, and you do that do it at your own pace, online learning. So watch 3 videos, do a quiz, that sort of thing. And then there's a 3-day workshop, and that's all online now since COVID. So you don't have to travel anywhere. And then after the 3-day workshop, you begin working with your own clients, with your mentor advising you. There's a 1.5 hour call with your mentors each week, with your mentor each week, and the other few students that the mentor is mentoring. So you bring your own case studies, your own client stories to that call, and you're advised by your mentor, and you look over the shoulder at the other students working with their clients. So you get a very well-rounded understanding. There's also, after the 3-day workshop, 2 hours with me every week in a virtual classroom, which is a live online classroom where we do more learning. At the end of the 8 weeks, you don't just have information and knowledge, you've got experience, you've got runs on the board, and you know what you're doing. Not everyone does what Helen Mursell did, which was jump straight in and in her first week see 15 clients, as well as her normal caseload. So not everyone does that. She is an extreme athlete. But
need the right memo.
No, but it's about jumping in and using TRTP, and your hand is held by your mentor. And at the end of the 8 weeks, but wait, there's more. We don't just say, bye, see you later. No, that's where the real learning begins, where you become a member of our TRTP practitioner community. And so there is so much support. There's a 1-hour video conference call each week, which is continual professional development. There's an online forum where you can put up a tricky case and be advised by others. I mean, Helen, you put up one recently, even Helen, who's in our teaching team. And the support, we have a particular culture in our community. And that's generosity, kindness, and egos left at the door. It's a very safe place. And for those who don't fit our culture, we actually show them the door. So we guard our culture. Richard, would you like to say something about the community?
I was reflecting on this last Friday in our call, how so often professional communities are very guarded because we only talk about our successes. We never talk about our struggles, and we keep all of our intellectual property to ourselves because we don't want anyone else to get in on this. And this is the most generous, inclusive, caring, loving, supportive community that you'll come across professionally. At least in my experience, it is very equal. There are no prima donnas. There's no intellectual elitism. It's very collaborative, very supportive, and pretty much free. And it's there all the time. And it's wonderful to be part of that. To know that I can share anything, wins and losses, struggles, and anything that I'm going through, and know that you'll only ever get support from it.
Yeah, Helen.
To that question as well, ongoing, just being one of the great things about being a TRT practitioner is that when you're taking your client through, you're also going through the process in some ways yourself. And so, and you can use, it's not really just this process that you do and then that's it. We teach our clients actually to use aspects of TRTP in their daily life. So if they've had a stressful conversation with their boss at work, they can use sort of aspects of the TRTP process to be able to take the charge out of that experience so that the balloon of life doesn't get big again. You can just take the charge out as you go. So that's one of the big upsides of being a TRT practitioner, is that you're just forever doing your own work alongside the clients. And just to second everything, the community is amazing and the training is amazing. In other training,
was it valuable? Was it worth it?
Yes, it's absolutely worth it. And in other training that you do, well, I've gone away and I thought, well, that's a great technique, and I've gone to use it and I thought, oh shit, what do I do now? Oh, not sure, I'll go back to my old ways. Whereas with TRTP training, there's just so much support ongoing. 4 years on, I haven't barely missed one of the Friday sessions because there's just so supportive, and it's just a wonderful community. So there's just that ongoing, yes, and it is value for money. Well, so while I don't, as a psychologist, I don't endorse a particular practice of treatment, but I will say that my books are filled till now. April is a new month that are bookings, and that's definitely seems to have happened since a certain training that I did
in TRTP. So you're booked out till April, are you saying?
Absolutely, yes. That's my biggest challenge in stress, is trying to fit people in.
Everybody in who wants TRTP. What
Yeah,
about
and
you?
then people
Yeah.
that are coming for short-term work, so it's not like it's all full because of
Long
lots
term.
of long-term clients.
Yeah. How about you, Kim? How's your practice changed?
Well, similar. I was one of the reasons for doing TRTP is I'm sort of more at the tail end of my career, and having worked in medium long-term psychotherapy, I was wanting something more dynamic, and I was seeing more and more trauma-related clients, and I wanted something more, and feeling a bit tired. And then I did TRTP, and now I'm working more than I've ever worked, and I've got a busier practice than I've ever had, and I'm not looking at in the next couple of years of retiring, which I was planning on doing at the end of this year, and I'm just too busy, and importantly, I'm feeling so revitalized.
That's the key, isn't it?
It's just such rewarding work. There is nothing like the end of the first session to see a client at the end going, some say it's a spiritual experience. I had one woman recently say that felt like a deeply spiritual experience. I'm tingling all over, or I feel so free, I feel liberated. There's no other training I have ever done where at the end of the first 2 or 3 sessions, there's been clients who have just transformed before your eyes. So that's transformed me, and my practice that I'm so busy, likewise booked out. And I just love it.